Check podcasts.
Hello and welcome to Her Love of Sports, where we shine a light on the incredible women making waves in the sports industry. Today, we are thrilled to feature a true powerhouse. She made a splash on the world stage, representing Canada internationally for over a decade. Competed at the 2020 Tokyo Olympics. She's an inspiration to all of us. Canadian Olympic diver Celina Toth. Celina, thank you so much for joining us in studio at Her Love of Sports. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. This is so exciting.
Oh, well, I'm so glad we finally got you in studio to do this because we've known each other for a couple years now.
Yeah.
We met through Lululemon, and then you came out to some of our Her Love of Sports events, which was truly fantastic. So I'm glad to sit down with you and just hear all about your career, which we're going to dive right into, okay?
Lol, pun intended.
Exactly, right? There's going to be lots of those today. I just can't help myself. So diving. Let's start from the beginning. How did you find the sport diving, and how did it find you?
Okay. I did lots of sports growing up, bowling, figure skating, soccer, all that stuff. And then eventually found gymnastics and did that for quite a few years, but was just such a difficult sport to be competitive in, right? And we had some Romanian coaches, and it was kind of a bit of old school, and I wasn't loving it, and they were making me do skills I wasn't ready for. So I told my family that I wanted to not do this anymore. And they were like, oh, well, you got to see out the year. I'm like, okay. So I saw out the year, and they were like, so I'm like, yeah, no, still don't want to do this. They're like, okay, well, you're going to have to go in and tell your coaches that you're quitting then. And I was 12. And I was like, oh, okay. And then one of the pre-competitive coaches was a diver, but I didn't know that. And so she had talked to my parents and was like, well, why don't you try this sport? Because my dad was like, well, you have to do something. You're not going to be a mall kid. And I was like, okay. And he's like, you're not allowed to do dance or cheerleading. I was like, all right, 2 sports I want to do. Okay. So I quit. I went in, I told them I was done on a Monday. I called the diving club in London. So I lived in St. Thomas. So it was a bit of a drive. On the Wednesday, had a tryout on the Friday of that week. And then I was on the team the next Monday, training full time. And also, when I walked onto that pool deck the first time I walked out and I met the group, there was 4 or 5 gymnasts that I trained with in gymnastics who had quit, and I just never saw again. And we're diving too. So that was really cool.
Wow, that's amazing. And so I'm assuming at 12 years old, then you're already in the structure of flipping and doing all that in gymnastics.
Exactly.
So what was that transition like, going from jumping in gymnastics or going into the foam pit in practice to then going into water?
Into water. That was definitely interesting. Landing on your feet and then moving to your head was quite difficult. I remember the first day that I was trying out, they tried to get me to do a front 1.5. And I was like, yeah, no. A front dive was easy, front flip easy. Don't quite know how to do that yet into transitioning it. So it took some time and learning entries and kind of figuring out what diving was before I could integrate that and really get that transition into the 1.5. It's funny now though, with high diving happening, it's oh, you could try that. And you'd have to retransition your body to figure out how to land on your feet. And I'm like, yeah, no, I don't want to do that again. So I'll just stick with landing on my head.
And diving, you don't hear too, it's not like a mainstream sport or something like soccer, basketball, where you can just sign up right away. You kind of have to search it out a little bit. I worked at the Saanich Recreation Center for many years, and at Commonwealth, diving was a big thing, and I started seeing more of my camp kids come in and say that they were doing diving and that. But how was it? So you grew up in Ontario. How was it over there? So you found your sport after gymnastics. Was it quite popular, or was it more of a specified sport?
When I was in Ontario, it was definitely harder to recognize, I think, or get to know. I had no idea it existed. I remember when my dad and I drove up to the pool, the aquatic center in London, and I was like, this is where we're going? Every time I drove past it with my family, I was like, I want to go in there. I don't know what that building is, but it looks like a spaceship, so I want to go. And when we drove up, it was like, this is where I'm going to dive. And I was there for years, and it was amazing. And so, yeah, you don't, unless you live in a community where that is prevalent, you don't see it. And in Ontario, it's so spread out, right? There's so many clubs. So there was a lot of us, but it doesn't attract very well. I think majority of people in Ontario came from swimming because they're in the pool and they see it and they're like, oh, that's really cool. Or we get you right when you're little. Diving, like you said, is such a specialization sport that you have to start when you're little to like get those acrobatic moves and stuff if you don't do gymnastics first. So I was very late to start at 12.
Right.
And to have gotten where I was to the level that I did was very, people didn't think I was going to be able to do it because I just started so late. But in Victoria, it's nice because the Commonwealth is like one of the main pools, and it's such a beautiful facility, and it's right there in your face, and it's so awesome. And you get to walk, they're diving all the time, like in the morning and afternoon. So you get to see so much. And I think that's such a great way to, bring people in, is to see it. So yeah, we're pretty lucky with the facility we have here.
Awesome. We're going to talk more about how you got into diving and all the accomplishments you had right when we get back from the break. Okay, we're joined by Celina. Celina, we talked about how you first found diving, and talk to me a little bit about the different divings. Now, I know there's different meter boards. So did you specialize in all of those different boards, or do you pick a different height? Because I know that you did the 10 meter in the Olympics.
Yes.
So talk to me about that.
When you're a junior, so starting diving until you're 18, you essentially do all of them. So 1 meter is an event that happens at junior nationals and stuff, and junior worlds. And so they do 1 meter, 3 meter, and platform. And depending on your age group, what level platform you can dive at is varied. So like when you're the older level of junior diving, you can do 10 meter, but they kind of limit it so when you're younger, so that you're not hurting your body at an early age, because it's quite impactful hitting off of 10 meter. When you're a senior, you can do 3 meter and platform. But majority of the people are probably going to have specialized by that point. Nowadays, we're finding younger athletes specializing earlier just so they can keep their body strong, and depending on what they fit better. I was relatively good at both as a junior, but I knew that where my strengths were going to lie, competitiveness in Canada and internationally, was on platform. So I stuck to 10 meter, and I kind of started to specialize that in like 16 to 18, but not like, I was still doing springboard at a good level when I was a junior until I graduated and went on to the senior level at 19.
Okay, wow. So just remind me a bit. So going off of Commonwealth pool, what would be the first platform? Because when you go to Commonwealth, on the left you have like the little one, which would be the
like on the 1 meters, like where those
1 meter,
smallest
3
springboard,
meter, then 5 meters the first platform. Yep. So you're the highest one at Commonwealth.
Yeah. So there's even a 7.5 in between the 5 meter and the 10 meter.
What is that? So like, I'm not obviously a diver. I could barely even walk off the 3 meter. I actually once fell off the 3 meter.
Oh no!
And I was like, I'm not going back. It was embarrassing. And we're done here.
Falling is much different than jumping, so I could imagine. Yeah.
What goes through your body when you're at the 10 meter? What goes through your body before you go to do one of your dives?
It's different all the time. Obviously when you're younger, there's a lot more fear. When I got older, there was a lot more of that fear. When I was getting towards the end, I could just feel my mind not being able to handle it as well. But majority of the time, you're thinking about those little cues that you need to do for that dive. So depending on what dive you're doing, it could be a reverse 2.5 was the dive I started out with, and it was my like solid dive. I know it was very, very confident for me. So I was just thinking of those small little cues right before I would go. And so I was pretty calm. And then when it got to my last dive, I was usually like pooping my pants. Like, I was so nervous. It was so hard. I was really happy in the end of my career, to finally like nail that dive down a couple of times. But I'm still, through that anxiety, I'm still trying to like hone in on those specific things. But for majority of it, it's either fear or confidence.
And diving is one of my favorite sports to watch in the Olympics. I don't know how it's judged. I don't know anything about it. I just know that they get really excited when there's not a big splash. Yes. But it's just so outstanding what you guys do as athletes in the air, into the pool, off the springboard. It's just absolutely amazing. So talk to us a little bit about what you're being judged on when it comes to a dive.
So obviously the overall look, no splash. So that entry is called a rip. So it makes like a ripping sound when you hit it, and everybody kind of has like a different sounding rip, which is super cool. But so when you hit the water, nice and tight, legs straight, toes pointed. And the hurdle on the springboard, when they do that walk to the end, we want it to be like straight and stable. If you're leaning a little bit, that's not really very good. You want to be not too close to the board, but you don't want to be super far out either. So it all kind of, those little things come into play with the overall image. You want to be able to, you don't want your legs to split apart because that will look kind of bad. You can lose points for that. A lot of flat feet happens when you're a little kid. So you got to really work on that because judges don't like that. But yeah, kind of like, it's very similar to gymnastics. There's just those specific things with the entry and, you know, the takeoff that is going to have a big impact on that overall score.
What they're looking for.
Yeah.
Okay. So you've had so many accomplishments. Read off a few. 4-time World Cup finalist, Commonwealth Games in 2018, 2022, PanAm Games in 2023, and of course the Tokyo Olympics in 2020, which we are going to discuss when we get back. Okay, we're back with Celina. We talked about how you got into diving, how you get scored in diving, and now we're going to talk about one of the biggest accomplishments for any athlete, going to the Olympics, which you did, representing Canada in diving, the 2020, which happened in 2021 because of COVID, but the 2020 Tokyo Olympics. Wow, what an experience. And I got to see you right after because we had a Her Love of Sports event, and I got to see you, which was so phenomenal. So just talk to us about that experience going to Tokyo.
Oh, goodness. That's a tough one, especially now that Paris has happened. And I've been working the games with my position at CSI Pacific and the communications coordinator. I got to follow all the athletes in Paris and see them have such an incredible time. So it kind of makes Tokyo a little bittersweet because I was also training for Paris as well before I decided to retire. And so it was hard. I did not know if I was going to make it to the trials. And like, I was on a lot of those calls as an athlete rep, deciding what are we going to do? Is Tokyo going to happen? What do we want to do as a country, as the athletes? And to be honest, I wanted them to cancel it because of my own insecurities of like, will I make it? Am I going to be good enough? Is prolonging it a year, like going to be helpful for me? Is it going to be helpful for all the athletes? Or like, it was just so overwhelming. So I'm obviously so glad that it did not get canceled and that I worked my butt off to make sure that I made it happen for myself. And that year was probably the hardest year mentally, but physically, that break was the best thing that could have ever happened for me and to be able to make it to the Olympics. And so when I was there, it was incredible. Like my diving had never been better. I was so excited. My friends, when I would talk to them on Skype or on FaceTime or whatever, would be like, you're glowing. Like, and it was because I was physically doing so good. Like I was a threat for a medal for sure. And I just knew it, but once you got on that stage and that board was significantly longer than a lot of the other 10 meters around the world. I don't know why, but you get to about halfway, you do your dry off, you throw your chamois down, they announce your name, which is all in my routine. So I felt pretty good until I get to the end of my routine, and I would usually be at the end of the board and I still have like probably from here to the wall still to like walk to the end. And I'm like, ugh. And that first dive, I froze. To be honest, I don't really remember much competing. And I feel like I kind of blocked it all out and blacked out in the moment. 'Cause as soon as I saw those rings, I was like, oh my God. Like, and it was just kind of all over for me. And I missed my first dive, which is my most confident dive. So that kind of shook me a bit. And during COVID, I didn't have the mental piece of diving is such a mental game. Once you're on that board in the competition, physically, you can't do anything else. It's all in your head now, right? And right before COVID happened, that training season, I had my competition mental game on. I knew that I couldn't lose if I was feeling good that day. And I didn't get to practice that because we didn't compete. Right. So the Olympics was like, oh my God, okay, the hardest part was getting there. And then once we got there, I was like, okay, this is good. And then I realized, I'm like, I don't have a tool that I need that I've had. And I didn't, and that was like a big mistake for me to not have learned earlier to be like, oh, this is going to impact you. And I just wish I had known that. And but overall, for me, the biggest thing was getting there. I knew every time I compete internationally, I have a good time, and I do my best, and I do really well. Like, I've had some great accomplishments. But yeah, it was definitely an interesting experience with not having the crowds, but then your parents there, and then still seeing the rings. And I think the whole thing had an impact on me. I'm like, well, this should be like a normal competition, but it's not. So to be honest, I still feel like I'm processing it every time I kind of talk about it, because I still haven't watched my competition back from 2020 or 2021. So yeah, and I watched all the diving with Paris, and I was super excited for all of the athletes, and of course I wanted to be there with them. But I physically and mentally could not continue on to Paris. So, and I know it was the right decision for me. So.
And like you said, it must have been so much balancing, because not only was the world going through COVID, and so you have all your life stuff going through, but now you also have your career and your diving, which, like you said, mentally, emotionally, and then also physically, you have to keep yourself in. So balancing the two of life going through it, and now it's in your Olympic personal career, is quite a lot to balance and to put together. It was great following you beforehand, and just seeing everything that you did accomplish and being there, and truly inspiring to watch. So thank you so much for sharing your Tokyo Olympic journey. Okay, more from Celina when we get back. I'm joined here by Celina. We're talking about all things diving, your career. We just talked about the Tokyo Olympics, and you also had some other fantastic accomplishments throughout. If you could think of one, take away the Olympics because we just talked about it. If you could think of one other one, what's something that sticks out that we're like, this is one of my top 5 moments?
Oh, probably the first competition that I won at nationals. Like, when I talk about it, it still gives me goosebumps. I was 16 and I won platform at the junior nationals in Thunder Bay in 2008. And I wasn't really one to watch then. I was better on springboard, I thought. And I had just come from the Olympic trials in Victoria, which was the first time I ever came here, 2 months before. They just invited me. I happened to do well at the seniors that year. And so they were like, oh, come, we have one more spot. And so I ended up making the event on the 3-meter final, which was weird. But so then 2 months later, I went and won tower and was like, what? But I remember, I didn't pay attention. I'd close my eyes, had my chamois over my head. I'd listen to music, whatever. And I can't believe my coach at the time, kept it so cool, because I had no idea that I was winning. And she doesn't have a good poker face, so that was quite entertaining. But after the fact, and so I remember just, because they would split it up back then, you would do prelims and your finals, and you would do half of your list, your optionals, and then you do your compulsories at the end, or maybe vice versa. I don't remember, so long ago. But I remember just being on the 7-meter on my last dive, which at that pool was the closest platform you could have to the stands. And I'm the loudest person in the pool. I cheer for everybody. And so I feel like I had such a big support system from the whole country at that point in time. I'd been around a little bit, so I knew a lot of people. And I remember just being on the 7-meter and standing with my arms out, and could see my teammates in the corner getting ready to just run down the pool deck. And I was like, okay, just have to land on my head. Just land on your head. Just land on your head. That's it. And I didn't care how it went. I just needed to land on my head. And it was a scarier dive for me at that time. And when I hit the water, and this doesn't happen very often, but I could hear the entire pool erupt from under the water. Underneath the water. It was it was amazing. Yeah. And I got out of the water, and the whole pool was losing it. Everybody had come, and this doesn't happen. This is so rare. I don't think I've ever seen it before. You see your teammates and stuff when they walk to the end, but not the entire pool. And I couldn't even get out of the water. They were right there on the bulkhead at the edge underneath the platforms with me. And the person who ran the junior program at the time had come in and pushed his way in and welcome to the national team. And they brought my parents down, and it was just so weird and amazing. And that was that's what I wanted my experience to be from there on out, like everybody being together and such a supportive team, and not just, you know, kids in your own club, like across the whole country. That's what I wanted to always bring back to everybody, and was kind of how I led my training and competing in my career. So that moment was just absolutely incredible, and I'll never forget it.
Getting goosebumps thinking about it too. And transitioning into coaching, because now you're coaching. You mentioned it the other day, doing Tuesdays and Thursdays. So what's that like for you, going and now putting your coaching hat on?
Oh, well, I don't love it. I wanted to judge. I preferred that kind of. I definitely want to go back to the Olympics one day and judge. It would be super cool to bring that back into our in our community. But I love just being with the kids and supporting them. I'm always there to help out. There's a new club at Dive Victoria, and just, you know, having some options for everybody on the island, which is super cool. And I'm happy that I can be a part of, you know, growing the community and be there and pass on some knowledge per se. I don't have the best patience, I would say, about myself. So if you're not there to work hard, I'm not going to be all that enthusiastic about coaching. But if you are there and want to have fun and want to work hard, then I'm absolutely like all for it. And I'll be there to, you know, to help support anybody that, you know, has a goal or a dream. So,
and you're learning from the best. You're learning from Celina herself, representing Canada for over a decade, went to the
20
Olympics.
years.
20 years.
I dove for 20 years.
20 years.
It's insane, hey?
That's wild. It's so phenomenal. Such an inspiration. So, I mean, the kids, the adults, whoever you're coaching is truly lucky to have you.
Oh, thank you.
Final few moments with you. Any advice you would give to young divers who are just starting out?
Oh, go for it. Like during the whole Olympic experience, for me, it was never give up. And I know a lot of people think that's super cliche, but don't be scared to have a dream or a goal or do something that scares you. Like, and if it scares you, don't give up on it. Like, that's always what I told myself. And when you're young, everything seems intimidating if, you know, you're that quiet, shy kid. And that was me at first. And now I'm loud and talk all the time, and just because I found my people and the sport that brought that out in me. I felt like this was my home, and so it helped me go after the scary things. And yeah, it was hard, but I never gave up, and because I thought it was super cool. So I would say that to any little kid that saw something that they just liked. Go after it, whether you're scared, crazy, nervous, whatever. Like, if you think you're a little nuts for doing it, that could be the best thing that ever happened to you. So it was for me.
Thank you so much for coming on Her Love of Sports, sharing your diving story.